Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Crypt Finder. So this is part 4 of an ongoing series all about underrated, undervalued, or maybe just completely forgotten psychological thrillers of the 1960s and the 1970s. If you missed part 1, 2, or 3, those links will be in the description down below. You can always go back and get caught up. So I've got another 10 films that I want to review tonight and talk to you about. If you are in the mood for a psychological thriller from yesteryear, I think all 10 of these would absolutely fit the bill. First up, all the way back from 1964, is Lady in a Cage. This is a dark, claustrophobic, way ahead of its time psychological thriller that explores the themes of vulnerability and cruelty and just the breakdown of civilized norms. The story follows Mrs. Cornelia Hilliard, who's played by Olivia de Havilland. She's an affluent widow recovering from hip surgery, and to maintain her independence, she's installed an elevator so that she can get between the floors of her home without assistance. But one sweltering summer day, while her son happens to be away for the weekend, Mrs. Hilliard becomes trapped in the elevator during a power outage. Helpless and suspended between the floors, she tries desperately to call for help. Her pleas are broadcast over an intercom system to the empty street outside her house. Her isolation soon attracts the wrong kinds of attention. Mrs. Hilliard is forced to confront not only her own helplessness, but the thin veneer separating order from chaos. Directed by Walter Grauman, Lady in a Cage, it's tense, unsettling kind of film. It blends the home invasion horror with social commentary all about urban decay and greed and dehumanization. Its unflinching depiction of violence and moral breakdown, it was pretty shocking for audiences at the time and still feels disturbingly relevant. This is James Caan's first credited role, and he brings every ounce of menace to his performance. Critics at the time really complained about this being exploitation, but it's way more entertaining than that. And it's also more socially relevant too, considering the upheaval of the 1960s. Even now, I think it stands as a justified film about man's inhumanity to man and class warfare. Next up, from 1968, is the movie Pretty Poison. This is a psychological thriller with some darkly comedic undertones. The film follows Dennis Pitt, who's played by Anthony Perkins. He's a shy, socially awkward young man recently released from a mental institution where he was confined for arson as a teenager. Longing for excitement and connection, Dennis reinvents himself as a secret agent. He's fighting a shadowy conspiracy, and when he moves to a small New England town, he happens to run into a beautiful high schooler named Sue Ann Stepnick, who's played by Tuesday Weld. Really enchanted by her, Dennis draws her into his imagined world of espionage and intrigue, and as their relationship intensifies, the stakes rise and Dennis finds himself caught in a game where reality and delusion begin to collide. Directed by Noel Black, Pretty Poison subverts expectations at every turn, starting with the casting of Anthony Perkins. He brings his sort of nervous vulnerability to the role, and because of his role as Norman Bates, there is a certain expectation of where this film might be going. And Perkins is really good in this role. He is playing to expectations. And yet, there are some really nice moments in this film where there are flashes of things that are very different than what we usually get from him. And I kind of wish he had just gone for broke and just gone all the way in, because those nice little moments, they're really strong. But Tuesday Weld ends up stealing the film because of her chilling charm. It's a tale of psychological inversion where the predator and the prey roles are just constantly shifting. Though underappreciated in its time, Pretty Poison has since earned a little bit of a following, mainly for the eerie tone, the clever subversion of genre tropes, and the unusual shifting character dynamics. Next up, from 1968, a psychological thriller that really unravels the sort of illusion of the Americana suburbia. The movie is The Swimmer. Burt Lancaster stars as Ned Merrill, charismatic, athletic man who appears one sunny afternoon at a wealthy couple's backyard pool in an affluent Connecticut suburb. Seemingly out of nowhere, Ned declares he's going to swim home. He's going to cross the entire county, pool by pool. What starts as an odd but whimsical idea becomes an odyssey through the lives of his friends and neighbors because at each turn, Ned is greeted with curiosity, amusement, sometimes thinly veiled contempt, as if there is so much more going on that he is aware of, and the encounters reveal fragments of his past and the truth about his relationships. As he progresses, the tone gradually gets darker. The swimming pools and the manicured lawns all start to give way to regrets and memories and unsettling confrontations that really start to chip away at Ned's confidence. His journey becomes a metaphorical descent into self-deception and the hidden failures he refuses to acknowledge. It's strange, it's haunting, it's allegorical. The Swimmer is directed by Frank Perry. It's based on the acclaimed short story by John Cheever, although if Cheever hadn't penned this story, in another world, another parallel universe, I could have imagined Rod Serling actually creating something like this as an episode of The Twilight Zone. This is not a traditional thriller, but somehow The Swimmer is a unique blend of surrealism and social critique. It's such an odd film. I'm not sure the best place to put it, but I love the movie, so it's here among the thrillers of the 60s and 70s. Not because it's necessarily a thriller, but because it's such a dark, psychological character study in broad daylight with lots of chlorine. You've got a terrific score by Marvin Hamlish, and Burt Lancaster is really, really memorable in this role. Apparently, this was actually Burt Lancaster's favorite performance in any of his films because he really is able to tap into Ned's unshakable charm and yet the tragic emptiness beneath it all. Oh, and just as an aside here, I've had people comment they think I'm going way too deep into the spoilers by calling something a tragedy. So just to clarify, when I say tragic, I just mean more the overall mood or the circumstances. I am not trying to imply the death of the main character by saying that. I just mean tragic as in it might be more disturbing or profound than it appears, at least on the surface level. Next up, we have the movie Fright from 1972, often credited as one of the earliest true babysitter in peril thrillers. Fright is a tightly wound, suspenseful psychological horror film that helped shape a whole subgenre later, made famous, of course, by films like Halloween and When a Stranger Calls. The story centers on Amanda, who's played by Susan George. She's a young woman hired to babysit for a couple who are going to a nice dinner in the village, while Amanda spends the evening in a remote country estate looking after the 3-year-old boy, Tara. What begins as a routine night of babysitting turns unsettling as Amanda becomes spooked by strange noises in the eerie isolation of the large, shadowy manor. As tensions build, her fears prove to be more than just nerves. Someone is lurking outside and then inside the house. The intruder is not a stranger, but a dangerously unstable figure from the family's past. As the night just spirals into terror, Amanda is forced to confront not only the physical threat posed by an intruder, but her own desperation to protect herself and the child in her care. The movie blends domestic tension with bursts of brutal violence and psychological unease. There is some sexual assault, though, in this one, and I try to always mention that because there are some viewers that would immediately put them off. But its chilling rural setting, the performances, the slow-burning dread, it really lays the groundwork for many home invasion thrillers that followed. If you know of any films where the babysitter as the target predates this one, please let me know down in the comments. Keep me honest, but I think this might be the very first example of that sort of well-worn trope, and for that alone, it makes it a really interesting watch. Up next from 1972, Endless Night. This is based on the novel by Agatha Christie, but far darker and more psychologically charged than her usual whodunits. Endless Night is a haunting tale of ambition and obsession. The film centers on Michael Rogers. He's played by Hywel Bennett, working-class young guy with big dreams, a taste for the finer things in life. When he falls in love with a wealthy American heiress named Ellie, who's played by Haley Mills, they marry and build their dream home on a remote, idyllic plot of land known locally as Gypsy's Acre, a place just steeped in folklore and whispered warnings. At first, the couple, they're blissfully happy in their big modernist house out in the country, but unease starts to creep in as unsettling events disturb their peace. Superstitious locals, uneasy tensions with Ellie's relatives, and the intrusion of Greta, who's played by Brett Eklund, a friend of Ellie's who overstays her welcome and takes a power hold in the house. As the cracks in their dream life begin to widen, the film slowly shifts from romantic idealism to eerie psychological suspense. This is directed by Sidney Gillott, features a really strong score by Bernard Herrmann. Bennett and Mills both starred in Twisted Nerve in 1968 that I discussed in part 3 of this 5-part series. They have great chemistry together. It's actually kind of nice to see them here playing variations on a theme. George Sanders, also in one of his final film roles, is here as well. You can clearly see he's not in top form. His performance is fine, but his voice has lost a little of the luster it once had, and he seems a little unsteady. This movie has great moody visuals, shifting tone, a good finale, really making it one of the more unusual and underrated Agatha Christie adaptations. It's not a faithful adaptation of her work, but the point is it's still an interesting interpretation, a psychological thriller masquerading as a love story. The next one on the list from 1972 is the movie The Other. This is atmospheric, quietly disturbing, a psychological thriller with some strong gothic undertones that explores corrupted innocence and the hidden darkness within a child's mind. Based on the novel by Thomas Tryon, the movie is set in rural Connecticut during the 1930s. It revolves around identical twin brothers named Niles and Holland Perry, both played by Chris Unvernoki. After the death of their father, the boys live on their family's sprawling farm with their fragile mother and their beloved Russian grandmother Ada, who's portrayed by legendary acting coach Uta Hagen, who shares a special bond with Niles. She has taught him a kind of mental game that allows him to imagine himself experiencing other people's sensations, a practice which seems harmless at first. While Niles is gentle and well-behaved, Holland has a troubling streak of mischief that edges into something even darker. As a series of strange and tragic accidents begin to plague the farm, Niles insists that Holland is responsible. But their grandmother and the audience must grapple with whether Holland is truly to blame or whether something more disturbing is happening. Directed by Robert Mulligan, who helmed To Kill a Mockingbird, The Other unfolds at a measured pace, steeping viewers in a mood of sunlit dread and pastoral unease. Diana Muldaur, Victor French, and a young John Ritter are also on hand. The film utilizes some soft filters to give the whole thing kind of a dreamy look. The balance of childhood innocence and creeping menace really blurring the lines here between imagination and reality. It's very compelling. Next, from 1973, is the movie A Bell from Hell. This is a bleak, atmospheric, unsettling Spanish psychological thriller. It weaves madness and revenge and dark family secrets into a pretty haunting narrative. This story follows John, who's played by Renaud Verly, a young man recently released from a mental institution on probation. Returning to his small, decaying village in northern Spain, John moves back into his mother's old house and begins communication again with his wealthy but cold Aunt Marta, who's played by Vivica Linfords, and her 3 daughters. Though he appears calm and composed, there are some hints that John's time in the asylum and the circumstances that led him there have left some lasting scars. As he settles into the house, John begins to execute a series of increasingly elaborate and unsettling pranks on people around him. One of these is actually a variation of The Open Window by Saki from 1914, but others more disturbing. And this extends to his relatives too. He's testing their reactions. He's pushing boundaries and revealing their hypocrisy. This is all juxtaposed, of course, with this massive church bell that is going to be hung in the tower, and it just becomes this sinister symbol of what is to come. Throughout the film, tension builds as it becomes unclear whether John is truly insane or whether he has returned to exact cold, calculated revenge. The line between reality and delusion blurs, and a trigger warning here, you do see some sexual assault in this film, as well as real footage of cattle being slaughtered, so I got to mention that. This was directed by Claudio Guerin-Hill, who tragically died during production on one of the last days of filming. He accidentally fell from the massive bell tower set that they had constructed. And so there at the very end, the last few days, they had to bring in another director, Juan Antonio Bardem, who just stepped in to finish it. Now, I've mentioned him before as a director in part 3 because Bardem directed The Corruption of Chris Miller I reviewed during that block of films. The Bell from Hell is steeped in an unsettling tone. It's got striking imagery, morbid fascination with a lot of control and punishment infused in there. Fans of European horror and thrillers from the early 70s will really enjoy this one. Next, from 1975, The Stepford Wives. This is a creepy, clever, sort of quietly satirical psychological thriller/horror film that explores the dark side of suburban perfection and the fear of losing oneself in the face of conformity. Now, granted, I would classify this one more as a suburban horror film, but it tends to get lumped in as a psychological thriller quite often. And that's fine. We can certainly discuss more of the psychological thriller aspects of it. And so I feel like, yeah, it does still belong on this list. And I love the movie. Now, I do have to go just a little bit farther back here. The novel was by Ira Levin, published in 1972. Ira Levin also penned Rosemary's Baby, which of course became a very famous film by Roman Polanski and starring Mia Farrow. But this film, The Stepford Wives, was released in 1975. A lot of people are completely unaware that there was a slew of sequels made for TV movies playing on this exact same theme. You had Revenge of the Stepford Wives in 1980, starring Don Johnson and Sharon Gless. In 1987, there was The Stepford Children with Barbara Eden. And you also had The Stepford Husbands in 1996 with Donna Mills and Michael Onkeen. Yep, I've seen them all. But this film was directed by Brian Forbes. And unlike all the sequels that had sort of ever-increasing, diminishing returns, the original very tense, slow-burning critique of gender roles and male perceptions of fantasy and outdated norms. Its unsettling premise and the sort of satirical edge have made it both a cult favorite and a cultural touchstone. It still resonates today. Oh, I feel like there has been so much that has been written about this movie over the years. I could probably just sit here and talk for the next hour about the Stepford Wives, but don't worry, I'm going to bolster some restraint here. But over the years, there have been critics that have said it's pro-feminism, it's anti-feminism, it's a parody of the male patriarchy, it's about consumerism, it's just everything under the sun, which kind of lets you know what an engaging, interesting story it is if you can come away with that many different interpretations. So I know it's a pretty old film, but just in case you haven't seen it and you have no idea what the movie is about, okay, I'm going to be sort of vague. The story follows Joanna Eberhardt. She's played by Catherine Ross, who was America's sweetheart at the time, so that was very smart casting. She's a talented photographer, a modern, independent-minded woman who relocates with her husband Walter, who's played by Peter Masterson, and their children from Manhattan to the idyllic little town of Stepford, Connecticut. At first glance, it's all picture perfect, right? You have immaculate homes and polite neighbors. You have cheerful wives who are very devoted to housekeeping and cooking and their family. Joanna befriends Bobby, who's played by Paula Prentice, another newcomer, and they both share this uneasy feeling that something is wrong. The local women all seem submissive in an eerie way. The men in town all belong to a mysterious group called the Stepford Men's Association, which meets behind closed doors. And the more questions they ask, the more unnerving the answers. Beneath the placid surface lies a very chilling secret.
Charmaine's changed, Carol Van Zandt's changed, and so have all those other women's club members. I'm getting the hell out of Stepford.
Now, please do not go and accidentally watch the remake from 2004. It's a mess. There are plot inconsistencies, and I think taking sort of a hardcore black comedy line, that was the wrong approach here. I love Ira Levin's novel. I read it many years ago, and I got to give him kudos for the fact there's a lot of ambiguity in the book. You're never completely sure what's happening based on what you think is happening. The movie takes a more direct approach, of course, but I also remember many years ago, I can't remember where I read this, I just remember Ira Levin saying this started out as a Broadway comedy. He was writing a play, and about midway through, he realized, yeah, it's not funny. It's not funny at all. It's the exact opposite of that. It's terrifying. So he scrapped all of that and just decided to write a horror novel. And I'm so glad that he did, because I think at its heart, that's still what makes this work. That creepy knowledge that something is wrong. And then when you realize just what it is, it might be too late. You can also see echoes of this film in Jordan Peele's Get Out and also Olivia Wilde's Don't Worry, Darling. Both of them, they're not remakes of this movie, but you can certainly see how this film inspired so many others. Up next on this list, the movie is The Tenant from 1976. Very surreal, claustrophobic psychological thriller that delves into paranoia and identity and the terrifying dissolution of self. Directed by Roman Polanski, who also stars. The film follows Tchaikovsky, a quiet, unassuming file clerk who rents a modest Paris apartment, whose previous occupant, a woman named Simone, attempted suicide by jumping out the window. As he settles in, he's immediately made to feel unwelcome by the building's other tenants. They're cold, they're suspicious, they are intolerant of any noise or disruption at all. His attempts to make the apartment his own are met with hostility from the landlord and the neighbors, all of whom seem curiously preoccupied with how he should behave. Over time, he becomes convinced that the other residents are conspiring to erase his identity and transform him into Simone, who has since died due to her injuries. Little signs like her leftover belongings, the way people address him, the gradual adoption of her habits begin to kind of blur the line between reality and delusion. As his isolation deepens, his paranoia escalates into full-blown psychological terror. Is he losing his mind, or has he become the target of a sinister plot to consume him? Adapted from Roland Topper's novel, The Tenant is the final film in Polanski's unofficial apartment trilogy, alongside Repulsion and Rosemary's Baby. But this one is the lesser known out of those other films, so I felt like this was the time to make sure more people knew about it. I know that Polanski can be a bit of a polarizing figure because of his past history, but the film, it's a fascinating look at alienation and identity crisis. It's got also some Kafka-esque dread tossed in there as well. A really unsettling atmosphere of unease through the entire film. And finally, we have Coma from 1978. This is not nearly as obscure as some of the ones I've been covering in other videos on this topic, but this is a medical thriller that exposes the sinister possibilities lurking behind the walls of a respected hospital. And you just gotta love that. This is directed by Michael Crichton. It's based on Robin Cook's best-selling novel. It follows Dr. Susan Wheeler, who's played by Genevieve Bujold, a young, dedicated surgical resident at Boston Memorial Hospital. After her close friend, a healthy young woman, unexpectedly lapses into a coma during a routine procedure, Susan's concern quickly turns into suspicion. She notices a pattern. An unusual number of otherwise healthy patients are slipping into irreversible comas after minor surgeries. Despite pressure to stop digging, Susan continues her investigation. As she gets closer to the truth, she finds herself increasingly isolated and pursued by unknown forces determined to keep some secrets hidden. Suspenseful, sharply plotted, Coma combines medical realism with Alfred Hitchcock levels of paranoia. And Bujold delivers a very strong performance here as a woman whose curiosity and moral convictions place her in jeopardy, while Michael Douglas co-stars as her skeptical boyfriend and fellow doctor. The film builds an atmosphere of mounting dread, using those sterile hospital corridors and operating theaters and unsettling technology to create a sense of inescapable danger, making Coma a standout. It was well received at the time of its release. I just don't know how much it's on the radar of modern thriller fans, so I wanted to make sure we turn a light on this one. It's still pretty riveting even today. So what did you all think about that particular grouping of 10 underrated, undervalued psychological thrillers from the 60s and the 1970s? Please let me know in the comments what you think about those. Next time will be part 5. It'll be the end of this series. Many of you are probably thinking, oh, it's the end, and others of you are probably thinking, thank goodness it's over. But we'll take a look at another 10 films next time. So be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. That way you will be notified when that one drops. And again, down below in the description, you can go back and check out any of these that you might have missed. Until next time, everybody, stay curious and stay scared.